Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a very interesting show for you. All right, folks, you're not going to believe this stuff, but there is a theory out there that's got some credence to it about South Carolina and last year's game between them. This has a lot to do with Michigan and Jim Harbaugh and his, I guess you'd call him a spy, who was watching other football teams and attempting to steal signs, but it turns out he was pretty good at it, according to all the reports that we've seen. And let me get into this report, and then we'll get into the whole South Carolina connection and how this all plays together. This is some intrigue. This is on Bleacher Report by Adam Kramer. Talks about how Jim Harbaugh's days as a head coach at Michigan could be numbered. And if you'll remember, he recently got fined 4 games or got suspended for 4 games, which he took 3 of those as a self-discipline by Michigan, but he still owes them a game, or the NCAA thinks so, and they're not going to rule on that till 2024. But that was over a couple of cheeseburgers, which is all I thought it was. If you remember, it was all about where's the beef.
Where's the beef? Where's the beef?
Well, it turns out there's a whole lot of beef behind this, and that's why you really don't want to mess with the NCAA, because they still can cause you problems when they start digging around. So they got to digging around about Michigan. It turns out they've got a whole process of going out and doing opposition research on the teams that they have to play or teams they may play, and they're pretty darn good at it. The fella involved with this is a guy by the name of Connor Stallions, and it sure does seem like ever since Connor Stallions started helping them out, if you've noticed, Michigan's gotten really good all of a sudden. Last few years, they've been excellent. So this is kind of interesting to me that how all of a sudden Michigan got so good all of a sudden. See, as you can see, back in 2019, they were 9-4, and they were really upset with him. And then he went 2-4 in the COVID year, and he was looking at possibly losing his job. And then suddenly in 2021, he went 12-2, 2022, 13-1, and he's 8-0 right now. And it's funny how the last 3 years, all of a sudden, he got really, really good, and he was struggling big time. See how he's struggling back here? And that's struggling for Michigan when you're going 10-3, 8-5, 9-4, 10-3, you know, and you're not beating Ohio State. And, of course, he's won 21 of his past 22 football games. And he usually beats people by 2 scores or more. Now, Connor Stallions has been suspended until further notice without pay. He's at the center of the sign-stealing investigation. And it says text messages unearthed by Sports Illustrated highlight a system Stallions led, which included scouting opponents and potential future opponents over the past few years. Isn't that when Michigan got real good? It says while sign stealing isn't necessarily illegal, sending staff members in that capacity absolutely is. And the other issue is they were using their cell phones to record all the signals, which you absolutely cannot do. So that's another rule broken. It says leads to perhaps the most important question of all: what did Jim Harbaugh know, or perhaps most importantly, what can be proved that he knew? It says Harbaugh has denied having any knowledge of what is being alleged.
Are you sure?
Really? He has no idea. You know, he didn't even know about those cheeseburgers either. He couldn't remember that. He's got a memory problem. You know, it's funny for a guy that wins all those ball games and is running a huge organization like Michigan football, but his memory's terrible. He didn't even know this Connor guy, I don't think. He probably figured he was just like a trainer or something like that. It's funny how that guy was always standing beside a defensive coordinator or the offensive coordinator and yelling in their ear for some reason. I guess it was about, you know, footballs and jerseys and things like that. This is getting pretty far-fetched on Michigan's side. And what Harbaugh's probably looking at is another suspension, although this one would probably be significant. And look, he's been wanting to go back to the NFL anyway, so I wouldn't be a bit surprised after this and the last suspension that he'll head out, if I had to guess. And it talks about all the NFL places that he might wind up. And, of course, in the NFL, they wouldn't care about any NCAA stuff. But now we need to get into how this has anything to do with South Carolina. How could this possibly have anything to do with Carolina? We're going to get into that. And this is an article on A to Z by Zach Reagan, and he's kind of dug into this. It says latest report lends some credence to the theory that Tennessee was cheated out of a college football playoff. The idea is that Michigan, a program we know, was stealing signs. Also, they scouted Tennessee's games. And a lot of people don't realize this, but they were scouting our program as well. They sent an individual to watch the Kentucky game and recorded all our signals. Now, the theory goes that A, they would have those signals if they wound up playing us in the playoff. The other situation that is possible, and they may have wanted to do this, is to screw up our path to the playoff by getting us to have another loss. And it talks about how South Carolina's game plan seemed strangely perfect after playing terrible the previous week against Florida, where they got beat 38-3. They couldn't score a point. But Tennessee, specifically the defense, didn't play well at all against the Gamecocks. It seemed like a bad time to have a bad night. And it always seemed like the offense was calling all the perfect plays against our defense, now didn't it? Because if we were back here in cover 2 or cover 1 or whatever, they always seemed to have the perfect play against our defense. We never could stop them even once. Now, isn't that weird? They couldn't score a single touchdown against Florida the week before in 4 quarters. They never did anything but get touchdowns. And then, whoops, wait a minute. Another team that they played against, Clemson, guess who'd been scouting Clemson? Michigan. So Michigan had their signs possibly, another team that they might have wanted to screw up their path to the playoff. Because with Michigan, if they have a loss, all of a sudden either Clemson or Tennessee could have gotten in their way and kicked them out of the playoff. So what better way to screw them up than to help the opposition beat them? Then they're out of the playoff scene completely. Even if Michigan gets beat by Ohio State or whoever, they're still in the playoff, right? And then if one of those teams does get in, you've got their signs. Win-win for Michigan, right? And then you think, well, there's no way Shane Beamer's going to accept that information, that opposition research. Well, let's see. South Carolina at the time was 6-4. He was big time on the hot seat. People in South Carolina were talking about whether or not he was going to last very long there. And then all of a sudden, he beats Tennessee and Clemson, 2 top 10 teams, out of the blue. Nobody expected that. Everybody expected them to lose. As a matter of fact, they were a 3-touchdown underdog against Tennessee. But here's where it gets into the nitty-gritty. It says, a new report from Football Scoop suggests that Michigan may have tried to disrupt a program's path to the playoff by sharing information with another program, what we just talked about. It says, sources said that the Wolverines had scouted SEC foes, including Georgia and Tennessee. Moreover, a source with direct knowledge said that Michigan may have attempted to assist the opposition of a potential college football opponent in an effort to disrupt that team's potential path to the playoff. It says a source with direct knowledge indicated that Michigan may have attempted to assist the opposition. I had to repeat that. South Carolina isn't mentioned, and we don't know if Tennessee was the program that Michigan wanted out of the playoff. But the number of programs it could have been are very limited, and Tennessee would make sense because the Vols would have been one of the easier programs to knock out of the playoffs since they already had lost to Georgia. Plus, and here comes the big news. Are y'all ready for this? It's getting ready to, cheese is going to get binding right here. South Carolina head coach Shane Beamer is willing to accept information about other programs based on a fine that he received in 2016 for accepting information in 2014 about Wake Forest game plan. This was when Beamer was an assistant at Virginia Tech in 2014. Now, Beamer denied using the information in the game against Wake Forest, but he still took the information. So he accepted the information, but he just his conscience wouldn't let him use it. Now, he didn't care to take it, but he didn't want to see that opposition research that would help him possibly help win a game. He's not that competitive, see. Now, he might kick something and break his foot over a loss, but he's not a competitive guy. He wouldn't do that. But he did get fined $25,000, and he might have been under a little pressure after losing to Florida and Missouri late in the season. Now, we don't know if South Carolina did or didn't take information, but this wild conspiracy doesn't feel so wild anymore. It turns out, and if it turns out to be true, Vols fans have every right to be ticked. So, yeah, he's coming off 2 losses. The South Carolina crowd fan base is furious. They're distraught. What could help him more than beating Tennessee or even beating Clemson? And he won both. Very interesting. Now, this year he's 2-5, right? Doesn't have the signs, does he? Is that what it is? This is very interesting indeed. And I guarantee you there'll be some reporters directly asking him. Now, you can't expect him to, oh, yeah, sure, I took the information. You've already done it once. You wouldn't do it twice. I mean, you had a $25,000 fine over it, right? Very interesting. What a conspiracy. There's a lot of facts behind it, especially it said somebody with direct knowledge that they were trying to reach out and help the opposition. Who would you want to get knocked out more than the number 1 offense in the country that nobody seemed to be able to stop? And you sure as heck would like to stop Clemson too at the time. Very interesting. Oh yeah, the spy who watched me.
Vodka martini? Shaken, not stirred.
Yeah, Michigan, it would certainly appear they had themselves a spy, and they were watching and they were recording with cell phones, which you are not allowed to do at all. So this is just the beginning of this. We're going to see what happens with Jim Harbaugh, but it's not just about where's the beef anymore. Now we've got a beef.
Nothing is over! Nothing! You just don't turn it off!
Across the board, and Shane Beamer's got some questions to be answered, and so does Jim Harbaugh, and so does this Connor Stallions guy who I'm sure is lawyered up big time. Now, it's going to take a lot to get all this information out, but at some point, this may come out. So right now, it's a conspiracy, but boy, I'll tell you, there's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of smoke. Anyway, if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Lets me know to continue to cover this kind of stuff. Of course, our Tennessee Vols, and we got Kentucky coming up Saturday at 7 o'clock. I did a video on that yesterday. Boy, Kentucky fans are not liking us. Man, we live in their head rent-free big time. I mean, that video I did yesterday, man, they don't like us. Anyway, if you've not subscribed, it's on your right, my left. Just hit that little button. I would appreciate it. Cost you nothing, helps me out. And right over here's the most recent video that YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. And we'll see you next time on The Spy Who Watched Me.